There's a particular kind of silence that settles in after everyone else has left the room. The house is still. The light from the window falls soft across the floor. And then it starts, a conversation from 3 years ago, replaying word for word, as if it just happened. You remember the exact tone, the pause before they answered, the look on their face. And even though the moment is long gone, your mind won't let it go. It keeps turning it over, examining it, replaying it like a film you've seen 100 times, but still can't fully understand. Most people assume this is anxiety, overthinking, a mind that won't rest. But as the philosopher Schopenhauer understood, some people carry a deeper sensitivity, not to the world as it appears, but to the world as it truly is. They notice what others miss, they feel what others forget, and because of that, they remember what others have already erased. This isn't a flaw in your wiring. It's not a sign that something inside you is broken. You're not ruminating because you're weak. You're replaying because you're safeguarding the quiet truth inside you, the truth that most people never bother to protect. But here's what almost no one talks about. Stay with me, because what comes next changes everything. The interesting part is that most people don't replay conversations at all. They move through interactions like water through a sieve. A comment is made, a tone is registered, and then it's gone, forgotten, filed away under irrelevant. But you don't work that way. You hold on to the weight of what was said, not because you're paranoid, not because you're insecure, but because your mind is built to detect patterns that others dismiss. You're reading between the lines of human behavior, trying to understand not just what people say, but what they mean, what they hide, what they're protecting. Schopenhauer believed that most people live on the surface of life. They engage with the world through shallow scripts and social performances, never stopping to question what lies beneath. But some people like you, can't ignore the depth. You feel the weight of every interaction because you're attuned to the emotional undercurrents that most people never even notice. And that attunement comes at a cost. Because when you replay a conversation from years ago, you're not just remembering words. You're re-experiencing the emotional texture of that moment, the discomfort, the tension, the unspoken judgment, the subtle shift in someone's tone that told you more than their words ever could. You carry that with you, not because you want to, but because your mind refuses to let go of anything that felt unresolved. Let me tell you something I've learned after years of watching this pattern in myself and others. There was a time when I thought this was a curse. I would lie awake at night, replaying conversations from weeks, months, even years before. A comment someone made at dinner, a look someone gave me in passing, a moment where I said something that didn't land the way I intended. And I would ask myself, why can't I just let this go? Everyone else seemed to move on so easily. They would have a difficult conversation and then go about their day as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't. The conversation would loop in my mind over and over, like a song I couldn't stop hearing. For a long time, I believed something was wrong with me, that I was too sensitive, too fragile, too stuck in my own head. But then I started to notice something. The people who forgot conversations so easily were also the people who repeated the same mistakes over and over. They hurt others without realizing it. They said careless things and never thought about the impact. They moved through life without ever questioning their own behavior. And I realized they weren't healthier than me. They were just less aware. Pay attention to this part. When you replay a conversation, you're not spiraling, you're analyzing. You're trying to understand the emotional mechanics of what happened. You're asking yourself, what did that person really mean? What was I feeling in that moment? Could I have responded differently? Should I have said something I didn't say? This is emotional intelligence in action. Most people don't do this. They experience an interaction, feel something uncomfortable, and then immediately distract themselves. They scroll, they watch something, they move on. And in doing so, they never process what actually happened. But you process everything. You turn the moment over in your mind, examining it from every angle, trying to extract meaning from it. And yes, Sometimes that process is exhausting. Sometimes it keeps you awake at night. Sometimes it makes you feel like you're carrying a weight that no one else seems to notice. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You're just operating at a different level of emotional depth. Schopenhauer wrote that the world is full of suffering because most people are blind to the deeper currents of life. They live in a state of comfortable ignorance, never questioning, never reflecting, never truly understanding themselves or others. But some people, the ones who feel too much, who think too much, who remember too much, are forced to confront the full weight of existence. And that weight is real. It's the weight of noticing when someone's words don't match their energy. The weight of remembering a promise that was broken years ago. The weight of carrying the emotional truth of a moment that everyone else has already forgotten. This is why you can remember a conversation from 20 years ago, word for word, while the other person has no memory of it at all. Because to them, it was just another interaction. But to you, it was a moment of truth. A crack in the mask, a glimpse of who they really were. And your brain filed it away. Not out of bitterness, not out of resentment, but out of wisdom. Because the next time someone shows you who they are, you won't need to wonder. You'll already know. There's a quiet shift happening in the world right now. People who spent decades trying to fit into social expectations are finally realizing that they don't have to. They're stepping back, choosing solitude over performance, choosing peace over noise. And if you've found yourself here in this quiet corner of the internet, it's because you're part of that shift. Before we continue, I want to invite you to stay. This channel is for people who feel too much, who think too much, who remember too much. People who spent years believing they were broken, only to realize they were just paying attention. If that's you, you're not alone. Join this quiet space. And when something here resonates, share it in the comments. Because the people who understand this, the ones who replay conversations, who guard their peace, who choose solitude over shallow connection, are rare. And when we find each other, it matters. Let's continue. Because what comes next is where everything becomes clearer. Here's what most people don't realize about replaying conversations. It's not just about the past, it's about the future. When you replay a conversation, you're not just reliving what happened. You're preparing yourself for what might happen next. You're running simulations in your mind, testing different responses, imagining different outcomes. You're trying to understand the rules of human interaction so that you can navigate them more safely. This is a survival mechanism, and it's one that develops after years, sometimes decades, of being hurt by people who didn't think before they spoke. People who made careless comments and never noticed the damage they caused. People who dismissed your feelings, invalidated your experiences, or used your vulnerability against you. After enough of those experiences, your mind learns to be careful. It learns to replay, to analyze, to protect. Because if you can understand what went wrong in a past conversation, maybe you can prevent it from happening again. Let me speak directly to you for a moment. If you've spent years replaying conversations, you've probably been told that you need to let it go, that you're overthinking, that you're too sensitive, that you need to move on, and maybe you've tried. Maybe you've told yourself that you're going to stop analyzing every interaction, that you're going to be more like other people, lighter, easier, less affected by what people say. But it never works, because you can't turn off the part of you that notices. You can't stop your mind from seeking patterns, from trying to understand, from preserving the emotional truth of a moment long after everyone else has forgotten it. And here's what I want you to understand. You don't need to change this about yourself. This isn't something you need to fix, it's something you need to accept, because the ability to replay conversations, to hold on to the emotional weight of what was said, is also the ability to learn from experience in a way that most people never do. It's the ability to recognize when someone is being dishonest, to sense when something is off, to protect yourself from people who would otherwise take advantage of your trust. You're not replaying conversations because you're anxious. You're replaying them because you're wise. Schopenhauer believed that suffering is the natural state of existence, that life is a constant struggle between desire and disappointment. And for most people, that struggle plays out unconsciously. They want things, they're disappointed, they move on, they never stop to ask why. But people who replay conversations are different. They're not content with surface-level understanding. They want to know why the disappointment happened, what caused it, what they could have done differently, what the other person was really thinking. And that search for understanding is both a gift and a burden. It's a gift because it makes you wiser, more perceptive, more emotionally intelligent. You learn to read people in ways that others can't. You notice the small inconsistencies in what people say, the subtle shifts in tone that reveal their true feelings, the patterns of behavior that predict how they'll act in the future. But it's also a burden because it means you can never fully relax around people. You're always watching, always listening, always analyzing, always preparing for the moment when someone might say something that cuts deeper than they realize. And that vigilance is exhausting. There's a difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is the peace of choosing your own company over the performance of pretending to be someone you're not. And for people who replay conversations, solitude often feels like oxygen. Because when you're alone, you don't have to analyze, you don't have to prepare, you don't have to replay. You can just be. The noise stops, the vigilance fades, and for the first time all day, your mind can rest. This is why so many people who replay conversations also prefer staying home. Not because they're antisocial, not because they're afraid of people, but because social interaction requires a level of emotional energy that most people don't understand. Every conversation is a performance. Every interaction is a calculation. Every moment with another person is a moment where you're reading, analyzing, protecting. And after years of that, you learn to choose peace over performance. Here's something I want you to consider. The people who tell you to stop overthinking are often the same people who never think deeply about anything. They move through life on autopilot, repeating the same patterns, making the same mistakes, never questioning why they do what they do. And they assume that because they don't replay conversations, you shouldn't either. But they're wrong. Because the ability to replay conversations, to hold on to the emotional weight of what was said, is also the ability to grow, to learn, to become more aware of yourself and others, to develop the kind of emotional intelligence that allows you to navigate the world with clarity and purpose. You're not overthinking. You're thinking at the level that life requires, and the people who tell you otherwise are simply operating at a shallower depth. I remember a conversation I had years ago with someone I thought was a friend. We were sitting in a coffee shop, and they said something that felt off. It was a small comment, barely noticeable. But it landed wrong, and I couldn't shake it. For weeks, I replayed that conversation. I analyzed the tone, the word choice, the way they looked at me when they said it. And I kept asking myself, am I overreacting? Am I reading too much into this? But then, months later, that same person betrayed my trust in a way that confirmed everything I had sensed in that moment. The comment I had replayed wasn't random. It was a warning. My mind had picked up on something my conscious awareness hadn't fully processed yet. And that's when I realized the replaying wasn't torture. It was clarity. My mind wasn't punishing me. It was teaching me. Every conversation I replayed was a conversation where something didn't align, where someone's words said one thing, but their energy said another, where I felt something off, but didn't trust myself enough in the moment to name it. The replay was my mind saying, "You were right. Trust that feeling next time." Schopenhauer wrote that the world is divided into two kinds of people, those who live on the surface and those who see beneath it. The surface dwellers are content with appearances. They accept what they're told. They don't question. They don't reflect. They don't replay. But the ones who see beneath the surface, the ones who feel too much, who think too much, who remember too much, are forced to carry the weight of a deeper understanding, and that weight is real. It's heavy, it's exhausting, but it's also what makes you who you are. Because without that weight, you would be like everyone else. You would forget. You would move on. You would repeat the same mistakes. You would hurt people without realizing it. You would live a shallow, unreflective life. But you don't. You carry the weight. You replay the conversations. You learn from the past. You protect yourself from the future. And that is not a weakness. That is strength. Let me tell you what I've come to believe after years of living this way. The people who replay conversations are not broken. They're not anxious. They're not overthinking. They're just paying attention. They're noticing what others ignore. They're feeling what others dismiss. They're remembering what others forget. And in a world that moves too fast, that values surface over depth, that rewards performance over authenticity, that kind of attention is rare. It's rare to meet someone who actually listens to what you say, who remembers the details of a conversation from months ago, who notices when your tone shifts, when your words don't match your feelings, when something is off. Most people don't do that. They're too busy performing, too busy pretending, too busy moving on to the next thing. But you do. You notice. You remember. You replay. And that makes you someone worth knowing. Here's the final thing I want to leave you with. If you've spent years replaying conversations, you've probably also spent years believing that something is wrong with you, that you're too sensitive, too fragile, too stuck in your own head. But what if the opposite is true? What if the ability to replay conversations is actually a sign of emotional depth? What if it's a sign that you're paying attention to the things that matter? What if it's a sign that you're safeguarding something inside you that most people have already lost? Because here's the truth. Most people don't replay conversations because they don't care enough to. They move through interactions without ever stopping to ask what they mean. They hurt people without realizing it. They repeat the same mistakes without learning from them. But you don't. You care. You notice. You learn. And that is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to honor. Because in a world full of people who forget, you remember. In a world full of people who move on, you reflect. In a world full of people who live on the surface, you see beneath it. And that makes you rare. But here's what no one tells you about being someone who replays conversations for years. The real challenge isn't the replaying itself. It's knowing when the replay is protecting you, and when it's keeping you trapped in a loop you've already learned from. Because there's a difference between wisdom and rumination, between reflection and prison. Some replays are teachers. They show you patterns. They reveal truths. They prepare you for the future. But other replays are chains. They keep you stuck in the past, reliving pain that no longer serves you, analyzing conversations that have already taught you everything they had to offer. And if you've spent decades replaying the same patterns, the same hurts, the same unresolved moments, there's another layer beneath this that we need to talk about. A layer that changes everything about how you move forward. That's what we'll explore next. A quiet corner of the internet for people who choose solitude over half-hearted connections.